what is CASB? Where did Netskope start off with? That was the start of our company, and that was the focus of the company initially. But what is it? It is still a big contributor into our customers. It's still that area. And what I'm going to do is to give you the understanding of CloudXD Security Broker, or CASB. You need to just break it up into three areas. Firstly, it is cloud, and cloud in itself is a complexity, because when people think cloud, they first think of like AWS and an IaaS, and that is infrastructure as a service. And not cloud for us is all web traffic, all software as a service, all infrastructure as a service traffic. So it's anywhere, internet traffic anywhere. So first of all, the definition of that, the way that we treat cloud, is data in motion, egress, sitting in our SaaS environment, sitting in an IaaS environment, outside of my traditional perimeter. Okay, so that is not CPE, so it's not customer premise equipment, it's not DC, which is data center, or private DC, or my private infrastructure. When you talk cloud, it is outside of our traditional perimeter. So cloud, and the purposes of from a Netskope perspective, it is web, SaaS, IaaS, anywhere, internet traffic from a visibility perspective. The second component is access. So who, what, when, where, how, is it private, is it public, and has that been authenticated? So the main objective of that access layer, part of cloud access, is the who, the what, the when. If you don't know who's connecting to the applications, who's connecting as the user, what device are they using, what documentation are they accessing, and what type of information they're sharing, that access, it becomes the question. Like, what is the access to this information? Who's got access to this information? Are we sharing it? Are we moving it? Are we creating it? Are we deleting it? Are we viewing it? From an access perspective, is making sure that there's a clear understanding. Cloud, internet, access, who, what, when, where, how, private, public, and authenticated. And security broker. It is a cloud platform provider with coverage, with global coverage, delivering all SaaS features and architecture. That is a security broker. So when I appoint Outsurance as my security broker for my car, they function as my security broker. Yeah? If the car gets stolen, I put in a claim with my insurance broker. Okay. So when you think about security broker, cloud platform provider is exactly what it is. It is a security partner with regards to how my users and my branches and my staff actually access the cloud, which we've now cleared up is web, SaaS, IaaS infrastructure anyway. So cloud access security broker becomes CASB. Okay. Any questions on that from anyone? No. So once you understand CASB, and we say CASB is actually traditional controls for egress traffic, where I've got a clear view of who, what, when, where on the data, using a security broker partner. So you guys as the resellers and our partners for Netskope, go to your customer, and we become in partnership with that customer, we actually become the security broker. And it needs to be, if it's a security broker that's cloud-based, when we say we're on Netskope and we are a cloud-based company, cloud means it needs to be global, data centers everywhere. And if I have a customer, Yanni or Sean that's on the call, I don't care where they sit. I want to be able to broker the same policies and controls for that user anywhere the user sits. Okay. To understand it, yes.
Kenneth, does this add any latency to an environment?
We can talk around the architectures and latencies and where does it sit. I mean, there's two types of CASB data. I mean, if you think about OneDrive and IaaS, the data is already sitting outside of your perimeter in a specific area. There's no data. There's no, in that specific case, there's no latency because we're not actually in line with the traffic. We're just looking at the SaaS data that sits there, Is it exposed publicly, privately? Is it confidential? Should it be shared? Who's accessing the data? So on your SaaS and your IaaS environment, there is no performance impact from our side at all, because we're not in line with the traffic. When it's web and internet, and we actually steer the traffic through us as your security broker, we actually have a benefit for partners, and we'll talk around a little bit in the new edge. So there's a component on performance that covers new edge, but in most cases, our customers benefit out of the fact that they use a cloud native partner that's got adjacencies. So we call it peering partners or adjacencies, where we peer, for example, with OneDrive everywhere in the world. So we've got a physical data center presence as Netskope, and every data center that Microsoft has a presence globally. So that when you use Netskope as your security broker, there's an optimized path to OneDrive, for example, and that's just one out of the 350 adjacencies. Okay, so in most cases, we actually benefit the performance. Okay, we can talk around scenarios where it's not ideal. If it's local breakup with local traffic, then your security broker will need to make sure that there's local presence where they control the data. So, and we're not here to talk around the new edge, but from an interest perspective for all the partners on the call, go and look at a video called Netskope New Edge, and it will cover why having a private global network gives you a better performance than using the traditional internet service providers or internet cloud providers like AWS, Azure, or GCP, because we've got full control over how we deal with traffic in the back end. Okay, so we can talk around that a little bit later.
Thanks, Dennis.
The user, the data, and the applications has changed. So we had this slide, and we talked, and the market will talk about digital transformation and where it's going. But for me, I need to make it simpler. The user, the data, and the application is anywhere. It's not behind a data center and behind a server sitting in a DMZ with a firewall that protects the DMZ, and you're splitting the database server from the web front-end server, and your users are accessing that data. When I look at the last 20 years that we've been involved in this, in cybersecurity and building networks and securing networks, the core focus was to keep the traffic out of the data collection point. I mean, where 90% of the data was in that yesterday era. Okay, when we look at the actual users, and only when you start drawing it, right? So you need to sit down, take a piece of pen, and you sit down on a piece of paper, and you draw it. You say like, okay, what applications are we using? Are we using Teams? Yes. Are we using OneDrive? Yes. Are we using WhatsApp? Yes. Or you're using another chat platform, but you want to use Slack, and you go like, where does it sit? There's no software installed in servers. The users are sitting in a coffee shop. They're sitting at home. They're working remotely. Forget about the whole hype around remote course and where that's going. Start simple, like draw it. Like, how many users actually sit outside of my environment? What type of applications do we actually use outside of this environment? So when I look at enterprise organizations where they've got 2,400 SaaS applications that they're using, it's not sanctioned or unsanctioned. It is just a general use. When we run a report on a functionality that we offer, we've got something called Risk Insight, and we run a Risk Insight report, and we say, show me what the users on an enterprise organization are doing with regards to applications, what they're using, Dropbox, file share, file IO, wiki. There's so many tools and applications that's out there where the customer has got limited to no control over where the data is going. Yesterday in our internal call, Sanjay Berry, who's our CEO, had a very open discussion, and he said, if you're a CISO and you don't know where your data is going and who's got access to your data, why are you spending money on information security at all? And it's actually, you need to go slower to go faster. So you need to draw it like you see it from your users. Where are they sitting? Like split tunneling. I mean, there's a problem with split tunneling on VPNs, because all you're saying is most of the traffic that the SaaS based don't go through the VPN. It takes off the performance issues on your VPN, but it gives you limited visibility into split tunneling, where that traffic is now direct to net. So when we look at the challenge, the user, the application and the data potentially sits in encrypted traffic. Teams is encrypted, Facebook is encrypted, Gmail is encrypted. There's all the traffic with HTTPS encryption. So we have a problem that the traditional controls that we had in place doesn't necessarily give us what we need to get visibility into this. So when I look at CASB, it started off with what is happening in my SaaS applications and what is happening in my IaaS infrastructure. So what is happening in my S3 bucket? What am I exposing documents externally? Am I potentially sharing information that I shouldn't have? So that was the start. It was SaaS and IaaS for cloud access security data. Someone just mute. Someone's just talking or asking a question. So the challenge with vendors and what vendors, a lot of vendors are offering at the moment with regard to cloud and SaaS is that 80% of all applications now sit outside of the network. And when I say vendors, I'm talking about SAP, Oracle, Mitel Voice, Broadcom Voice. I just think about the type of applications and the tool sets that our customers are embracing, and we're still trying to sell a box. Okay, so when you have a strategy, and from some of you know me for longer than the last 2-3 years, but I mean, we've sold boxes in 1999, NetRanger and intrusion detection and IPS and UTM and next generation firewall. Now we get to a point we're going, we have a problem that the majority of the traffic that we see is encrypted, that the applications and the data that the users consume is outside of the network, and we don't have visibility of what's happening with that data. Okay, so we question this little bubble on the left-hand side, and we say, when I look at actual traffic, if 85% of the traffic, according to firewall and proxy logs and network traffic logs, is SaaS-based traffic, and then 5% is IaaS, infrastructure-based traffic, and web, this traditional investment, the firewall, the secure web gateway, the VPN, the proxy, the endpoint management platform, the intrusion prevention, all those components catered to address egress. So how does my users access the internet? Historically, we forced all the traffic through this bubble, but when we actually look at the traffic, I've got a mobile device, I've got a laptop. My mobile device has got access to my OneDrive. My laptop's got access to my OneDrive. My mobile device is not managed by Netskope, but my OneDrive account is. So we got different ways on how we want to start controlling how the traffic flows and draw it. And when you sit with a customer, you say, tell me how your users connect to those 3 elements. The customer is going to say, we have a problem, because VPN with split tunneling and proxy only at a point in time just doesn't work. You can't have 10,000 users, proxy all the traffic to a proxy sitting inside a network through a VPN, and then you want to enable HTTPS scanning, and the customer goes like, it can't be done because the VPN is already encrypted, and now I've got a proxy with HTTPS traffic, bypass all HTTPS traffic. So we sadly see some customers sitting with a proxy and the firewall where all HTTPS traffic is not scanned, and you go like, so what are you doing with Gmail and Webmail and Box and OneDrive and all the HTTPS type applications? And the customer goes like, we don't know. So why would you buy any firewall? This is not a firewall discussion or a proxy discussion, but why would you invest in infrastructure if you're going to turn off 80% of the scanning? So it's a problem at the moment, okay, a real problem. So that continuous investment in this little bubble, we query for egress traffic, is this valid? For ingress, so inbound traffic, it's still valid, guys. If the customer says, I want to separate the network and I want to split the traffic between my domains and between my VDOMs and between my VLANs, that's fine, because you still need a east-west firewall, a data center type firewall that separates the network, separates the traffic, separates the contractors and third parties. That's fine. That's separation of network segmentation. When I look at ingress, so the inbound traffic, I've got a 1 gig link or a 2 gig link or whatever the client has. I need to protect the inbound traffic from DDoS, from IPS, malicious behavior, floods. I mean, there's a lot of inbound risk that we need to deal with. And then for that purpose, you would still need something to protect your network and your infrastructure and your firewall. But when I look at egress, so think about a firewall. Historically, you would configure an internal policy and saying, all my LAN users and all my internal Active Directory users going to the internet will have the following security policies. Imagine you can do the same, saying I don't care where the user travels, 10,000 users. They've got one security policy applied always, doesn't matter where they travel. So that's the outbound traffic. The challenge with CASB, Cloud Access Security Protocol, which is the point of discussion today, is we're dealing with two types of risk. The one is inline. So when the user connects to a OneDrive folder, uploads, downloads, moves data, creates data. And that we could control. And a lot of times on the firewall with limited features or on an endpoint client. But the data, when the user disconnects that machine, at a point in time, he disconnects. The actual data sits on a OneDrive folder. He can then take his wife tablet, username and password is correct. It's still Jannie Engelbrecht working for DGIT, connecting to a OneDrive folder for DGIT. It's a valid user, valid authentication. He's just, there is one-time password and he's authenticated on his mobile device, but he's using his wife's tablet. We don't have control over the wife's tablet on whether what can they upload, what can they download, what's the controls. So that document or that data that's been created on that OneDrive folder it sits there. So that we talk around that offline data. So there's inline data where we control how users can share and upload and access specific URLs, content, SaaS applications, IaaS applications, and infrastructure as a service, and how the data would flow there. But you have a problem that SaaS is offline as well. So we have the ability then as Netskope to go inside that SaaS instance and actually tell you, you've got the following 150 documents, 20 documents contain PPR records. Those documents is shared privately. So we can actually look at the status, what is the share instance of that environment. And if it's shared privately with specific users, we can say, well, it's fine, leave it there, no problem. But if it's shared publicly with a public link or URL that points to that OneDrive folder, you actually have a problem. So we need to then identify the problem and potentially quarantine the document, remove the access, or limit the access, or notify someone that that document is created on a OneDrive folder that's got a public link to it, and we need to think about it. So the same for IaaS, whether it's an S3 bucket or a Azure blob storage, that's exactly what we need to do. So CASB allows us to look at your offline data as well as your inline data for SaaS and IaaS, and still deal with the web. So the web part is the traditional URL filtering and all the other applications. We'll talk around that in the next session, but we're not going to worry about inline controls today. We're focusing on the CASB side of this discussion. So data protection is the core of what we do for cybersecurity. For everything we do, buying anti-spam, email solutions, data encryption, IPS, UTM, all the components that we've invested in. The foundation of information security management is data protection on critical data. There's no other reason for doing what we do. But what we need to do is reduce that surface area and look at those specific areas by blocking malicious and uncategorized websites, the risky cloud applications. For example, from a CASB's perspective, as a company, let's say we're all in the same company for DGIT for the purpose of this call, and we say that we only approve Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, Slack, and Salesforce for approved SaaS applications for DGIT that staff's allowed to use. I can create a simple policy, and maybe Sean, you can just show them on the policy side how we do a application-based policy or a SaaS policy, where all we want to do is say all other cloud storage SaaS applications will be denied. We can do that. So how do we block risky cloud applications based on a risk score? How do we prevent block uploads to cloud applications that is not approved by IT? At a click of a button. For those same 10,000 users, we're looking at deploying this anywhere the user sits, Singapore, Nigeria, South Africa, doesn't matter where the user sits, it is 10,000 users, cloud storage, uploads, denied, if it's not approved by IT. Okay. Block uploads of unmanaged app instances. Okay. Restrict sharing of activities to allow domains, right? So restrict sharing to allow domains. Just to import, I think Sean's going to demo that for you guys. We've got a corporate account and he's got a Gmail OneDrive account. Can I move data from a DGIT OneDrive folder to Tina's Gmail folder, which is also OneDrive, like inter OneDrive transfer of data. Restrict activities and allow for those domains. Apply restrictions based on context such as user group. So is it applied? I mean, as those rules be implemented, and we get context on the policies, and we get all the compliance templates. I mean, there's compliance templates for HIPAA, for POPIA, for GDPR, for Zambian, the new Zambian Data Protection Act. I mean, we've already created templates for those acts. So there's data identifiers, there's file type identifiers, contextual policies. We do exact match, fingerprinting, machine learning classifications, DLP type inspection, and that is done for your SaaS, your IaaS, and your web at a single point. Okay. To go through some scenarios to simplify the CASB statement, understand internet platform is being, what internet platform is being used, or which internet platform is being used. So in this specific case, it's a user, he's got web proxy, what applications is he accessing, what's the type of visibility that he needs here. We log the data to Netskope, and in that we can look at application in Salesforce. The uploads of data is 950 gigs of data. The risk rating is high or poor or medium. LinkedIn, what data moved to Microsoft Office 365, what data moved to Facebook, social media platforms. And that from a start perspective gives us a lot of visibility into these type of applications, the usage. And for any organization, you can do this down on a user level, group level, device level, application level, data volume level, or by risk score. So risk rating, we can say only show me where we've moved personal information to cloud storage environments where the risk score of that cloud provider is high. Give me a report on that. So that is like some of the first real values into understanding the flow. Exfiltration of company data. So in this scenario, we've got a user using PDF to go, sending information, we transfer, OneDrive, we block the PDF to go because it's not sanctioned and approved by the company. For the WeTransfer, we'd actually notify the user that you're attempting to upload files and this has been blocked. And we could also have a situation where, for example, the user tries to use WeTransfer. We can guide him and coach him and say, we actually want you to use OneDrive because that's a corporately sanctioned approved application. Or we can say just deny or allow the specific application. So exfiltration of information using encrypted tunnels and applications that's SaaS applications is a big problem because the application and the data and the user does not sit behind the firewall. Okay, you can force the user through VPN back to the network and back through the proxy and then get to the SaaS. But if you don't know that it's a corporate instance, a private instance, and what's the context behind that session, then all you're doing is allowing your user to go through a VPN, through a proxy to OneDrive, and you still don't know whether it's personal or confidential or what data are they sharing because the traffic is encrypted. So we're seeing a lot of customers talking around that. Sanctioned and approved cloud applications is the ability for you guys to then to say, from a customer perspective, what data is shared, what has been created, is it offline protected and is it inline protected? In this scenario, we see a scenario where using the actual user as accessing Microsoft Office 365 using an API. Netskope will look at the API. We will look at the document. We can actually look at the actual document information. Anyone that can view the link, this link is shared publicly. The following documents contain DLP. There's the actual scenario where we're detecting postal codes, we're detecting contact names within a OneDrive folder, an offline mode. So in this specific case, there is no software to be installed on the endpoint. It is an API call that we do from Netskope directly into this folder, and we detect exposure of those. For example, in this scenario, the URL that's been exposed publicly. We look at the actual content and do DLP scanning for POPIA, PCI, GDPR. We then get that visibility from a single view, and then we can actually say, well, it is a valid account, it's a OneDrive account, and I've got a managed device where I've got full control over upload, download, modification, and what that user could do. If the same user uses an unmanaged device, we can actually now control that access and say, you're not allowed to use this device to connect to this critical data, okay? Or use a tablet, and then we can enforce reverse proxy and say, you're not allowed to upload, modify, or download the data, but you can still view it using your tablet. So there's a different scenario and approach to how we deal with the SaaS application and what the users can and can't do towards this environment, okay? From a context perspective, you get firewall versus next generation UTM versus the CloudXD/Netskope. And this is just a slide to show you what is the difference between the traditional flows and controls versus a CASB/CloudXD provider. In this scenario, if you start at the bottom, you see typically we did TCP and IP-based protocols, and we allow traffic. Port, protocol, networks, destination. And then we started looking at HTTP, where we could say, in this case, it's box.com. Irrelevant of the rest of the content, all we can see is URL filtering. Box.com is allowed according to our URL policy. But what we now get into is what is the API and JSON layer? And we say, well, it's John at work, not John at DGIT. So is this personal or home? Is that a home connection, or is this a personal connection? And what we're seeing in the space is we do API inline security controls, okay, and we can do the API offline security controls. And we now say, well, it's actually a valid user using JSON and API-based inspection. We now understand it's a valid user, but it's using a private account to connect to a OneDrive folder. That you can't do on the traditional firewalls, and we've done lots of them. I mean, between me and Sean, and I'm sure between the partners, a lot of our partners have dealt with a lot of the firewalls that's out there. But if you can't control within the session, so we're talking about the OneDrive connection, it's already approved because OneDrive is approved as a company application. We need to be able to get context awareness, and we call it CloudXD capabilities to actually inspect on the JSON-based layer, and whether that information is shared, is it uploaded, is it downloaded, is it modified within that instance, is it a personal instance or an enterprise instance, and have the controls that you need within that environment. We're not going to go through all the features and functions, but there's an architecture, and this is where New Edge will play a role. I mean, guys, if you understand New Edge and you understand that this is Netskope is a global cloud provider, and we provide this network and allow customers to connect to this, and then we do the microsegmentations, microservices, we do adaptive access control, we do SSL inspection, the data protection, the threat protection, the compliance, the API and JSON-based decoding and inspection, and we integrate with third-party tools like identity and access management tools and EDR and SIEM, and there's a lot of components that plug into this service. I mean, Netskope has grown a lot, but in the point of discussion today, CASB API protection is the ability to look at inline and offline controls for SaaS environments. And then we still deal with IaaS, and we deal with next generation gateway and with private access, which is the other engines that we'll cover over the next 2-3 weeks. But from a client perspective, we need to be able to control and effectively control the SaaS applications that the staff and users use. And as a partner, if you can't control this right now, and you go and try and implement this on your firewall, you can't do JSON-based inspection and API-based inspection on a firewall. That doesn't exist. Okay, so think about where this is going and what type of questions our customers are coming with us with, because they're coming back to us and saying, listen, I need to be able to control upload, download. So when I look at the controls, the next slide, this is the type of controls that specific customer could actually get. I mean, let me just go back one. I'm trying to just move a bar, but it doesn't want to move. So when you look at this question, you need to get control. Activity risk and unsanctioned services. This is just a scenario. So based on category, informational low, medium, or high categories, you can have different function actions. So when you look at the action profile, we can look at browse, dislike, flag, follow, invite, like, markups, this is specifically with regards to, for example, a social media platform. So we can check whether you can like or not like, whether you can share or not share, repost, unmark, unfollow, unblock, unsubscribe, what have you done? So when you think about most companies saying, well, we'll allow you guys to use LinkedIn as a medium to discuss and share and apply for jobs, and we can look at all of that. Like we can look at unsubscribes, we can look at views. From the medium, on a medium level, we can look at app-to-app connectivity, what's been approved, what's been archived, connected, deleted, downloaded, join. There's so many actions that we can take. And then on the high side, we can look at what type of attachments have been shared. Is it copy, created, detected, deleted? And you can make specific actions for the SaaS applications that you see as in a customer's environment and say, how do we deal with that? So it's important to understand that this is not a block and allow. A firewall or the traditional ways that we would approach something would be yes or no, okay, or allow, or deny, or log. But what we see today is that the customers are asking us, we want the staff to be able to download and receive POPIA documents. I work for a bank. We need to do FICA, we need to do RICA, we need to do all the information. We need to gather information that's personal and confidential from our customers. But you can't reshare that. You can't take it on a machine, use your Gmail, and then send ID documents and contact numbers back out to the internet. So you should be able to receive, but you're not allowed to post, or you're not allowed to upload or share, not using any of the approved sanctioned applications. So it's a lot more granular. And to get this type of visibility, you need to have context of the user behavior in mind, and you need to have context of the SaaS application and what those components consist of. You can't just have the one. And if it's only a point in time discussion, you're going to have a problem. So when you think about our customers, I mean, we can go into Africa and our successes locally in South Africa. We're thankful for the amount of customers that's already embraced Netskope, but there's a list of global customers that we can talk to you about as a partner. What works in the oil space, oil and gas, what works in healthcare, retail, financial. I think if I think of our 70-80% of our current business, if I think about Africa, it's still finance, insurance, retail, healthcare. That is a big drive with regards to data. Where's the data going? Who's moving it? Forget about the impact that a compliance objective would have with regards to POPIA or FICA and all the other components. I mean, there's so many data privacy stuff happening at the moment. You need to be able to control that. Upload, download, view, create, post. And there's a lot of customers that's bought into Netskope globally, and we're happy to share with our partners. How do we make this work in specific verticals, in specific areas? We've got case studies and use cases for those specific verticals. And some partners are very strong in some areas. And those are the partners that we need to understand. What is that vertical? How do we make it simple? Sometimes you need to go slower to go faster, because the customer doesn't necessarily want to see us like a Swiss Army knife, open up everything, just come in there with a huge offer. Come in there with something small, show the value, grow from GASB, add SWIG, add NPA, add IAS, add SSPM, browser-based isolations. And there's a lot of components you can add to the as you expand the customer. But as a partner, you need to understand what is the problem areas for these verticals. There's a lot of use case information on our portal. And if you have access to the portal, or you need access, you can reach out to me or Yanni and the team at DGIT, and then we'll be able to facilitate that and support you. From a Netskope, from my side, closure, before I give it over to Sean, the main objective of the company and for what we want to do with our partners and our customers is protect data and users everywhere. So not a point in time, not behind a firewall only, not behind a VPN only or a proxy only. It is everywhere the user travels. I want full protection. We want to safely enable cloud and internet, right? So we've gone through the slide briefly on those three areas that we want to do this in, and we want to be able to scale. So whether you sit in Cape Town or Joburg or Ghana or in Zambia, you want to be able to adopt this service and scale to meet your customer requirements. And that's what Netskope does. I mean, we're a cloud-focused organization. We've got about 60 data centers and points of presence globally. And we had to support our partners. Appreciate that. Any questions that you'd like us to address?
Dennis, just a quick one from my side. I take it this applies to any cloud access requirement. So whether that's Azure, AWS, Google, makes no difference, right?
Yeah, so it's any of the public cloud IaaS providers, but also private DC. So if the customer says, listen, I need to be able to connect privately to a data center, my private data center, we also facilitate the remote access or private access to that. But the CASB part, the cloud access API-based capabilities, is focused on AWS Azure and GCP for IaaS, and then there's about, I think, under correction, 19 SaaS applications that we have API integration with, and there we can look at the, like I said, what documents are being created, who's accessing it, what type of devices is accessing it, reverse proxy. Should the document potentially have a link or a URL that exposes us to external exposure? Can we revoke it? Can we quarantine it? Should it be deleted? Should it be modified? We can look at the actions, but we support the majority of the SaaS and the IaaS providers out there.
Perfect. Thanks, bud.
Any other questions? Sean, can you share? I'll stop sharing. Thanks. And then Sean can just share you guys offline. So we're going to do a demo looking at offline API-based connection and how do we add that component, and then just the difference, I mean, and the OneDrive scenario where the user's moving data between a corporate OneDrive scenario to a private instance. But I think, Sean, if you can just give the guys a quick view on adding a API-based SaaS to Netskope.
Cool, thanks, Jannie. Yes, Sean, before you start, I just want to raise again the people who came a bit late. You are all able to jump in and ask a question anytime. So just unmute yourself if you have a question, and we'll answer it straight away. Thanks. Sorry, Sean, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much, Jannie. Okay, great, guys. So yeah, thank you very much. As Tina's mentioned, I'm Sean Kutsia. I'm supporting Tina's as well as Grant and DGIT, you know, in terms of getting customers visibility into their data and so forth. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time. I see we have about 14 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm just quickly going to show you. So this is typically what we do is we spin up a tenant within the Netskope platform. Okay, so we give it a customer name. Currently, we have different POPs. So I'm connecting to the Johannesburg one. This is my test tenant. Okay, and I can see quite a lot of data in terms of applications that's being accessed, how many websites have I been accessing, how many users are making use of this tenant. But then most importantly is you want to know, yeah, how much data is being shared. Okay, so how much data is being uploaded. Download you're not too concerned about, okay, unless it's malware and, you know, ransomware. But that's why we have the threat protection engine, where we prevent the users from uploading uploading and downloading malware. Okay, so, but what you can do is you can build out this dashboard as to your requirements. So we have different widgets. So there's just over 20 of them in total. But what I've done is I've built it out as per my role-based access control. So I'm the tenant admin. So I want to have full visibility of, you know, type of applications that's being used, the policy hits, you know, is there any DLP data that's being shared and where is it actually shared? Okay, then I want to see what's my blocked websites and if there's any malware present. Okay, so as Tina's mentioned, we can, however, do the API integration into the SaaS application. So you can see that there's Box, there's Cisco WebEx, there's Dropbox, Ignite, GitHub, and so forth. So there's your Microsoft Office 365 suite over here. So you will ask me what's the differences between this one and these ones over here. So we can, however, create your API protection within OneDrive and SharePoint. And then we can create another one into your Outlook and into Microsoft Teams. Now we can build policies based on that. In terms of, let's take it for argument's sake, you're concerned about GDPR data or POPIA data or PCI data, then what we can do is we can say, well, if you are sharing any GDPR or PCI or whatever data within a OneDrive or SharePoint or whatever the instance is that you configure, we can have visibility on that. And with that specific application, there's different activities that we can control. And I'll show you that now. Now, if we look at this one over here, which is, it says Microsoft 365, that's our not CSPM, sorry, so CSPM is more on the IaaS infrastructure. So this is on basically your posture management, okay, on Office 365. So we have a look at, is everything configured optimally as it should be within Office 365? It's just the security posture management that we're looking at, okay? So with these ones, we can actually do the controls into API. And I'll show you that quickly. So if we go into the policy engine, now like Tina's mentioned, so we have inline controls, which is your SaaS application. So we can create policies over there. We can create web policies as well as private applications. So that's your zero trust networking. This is all in one policy engine. Okay, so it's one single dashboard that you use to configure all your policies, and you have full visibility, whether it's your cloud applications, web, or your private data center traffic that we need to inspect. Okay, you have full visibility of that. So if I go for argument's sake, and I'm just going to make use of a DLP policy for argument's sake, then what we'll do is we can then go and create a policy based on a specific user. I can also build it then in terms of a specific user group. So we can integrate with your Azure AD or on-prem AD or whatever the case is. All right, and I can build those policies. I have different criteria. So like Tina's mentioned, so whether it's a source IP address of the office or maybe a guest Wi-Fi or whatever the case is, we can restrict that specific IP addresses as well. Then source country, we can look at the operating system. So we're only going to allow Windows. We're not going to allow a Mac device. Okay, and then the same with browsers. We only allow Internet Explorer and maybe a Google Chrome, but we'll prevent the users from using Firefox. Okay, access method is just in terms of how many, we have different steering methods. So there's the Netskope client, we have IPsec GRE, so that's typically used for your server environment or contractors that doesn't necessarily want to install the Netskope client on their devices. Okay, and then we have device classification. And under device classification, we do a bit of device posture management. We can look at certain services that needs to be present. We can look at your registry keys. We can look at your OPSWAT if you're licensed for that. We can look at your drive encryption, for argument's sake, say PGP drive encryption. We can also look if it's if it's domain joined or not. We can also look at certificates that's installed on your device. So if it's present, we'll classify it as a managed device. If not, it's an unmanaged device and we'll prevent you from accessing certain services. For argument's sake, something like Office 365. Okay. So with that, you can see over here, we can build it on a specific cloud application. Now, a specific cloud application could be a WeTransfer. It could be a Facebook. It could be, Dropbox or Box or whatever the case is, but we can also build it on categories. So if you look at the categories there, that could be a cloud storage, which will contain then your Dropbox, Box, WeTransfer, and so forth. All right, so you can build it on categories as well. If you look at an app instance, so remember Tina said to you, we can differentiate between a private instance of, say, OneDrive, okay, versus a corporate instance of OneDrive. So I'll demonstrate that to you, but we can, however, then set your corporate instance, okay, and classify it as an app, and then say, well, everything that goes to my corporate instance of OneDrive will allow, but if it's a private instance, we'll prevent the user from accessing. So private app is just when you create a private application that you want the users to have access to, for argument's sake, something like a jump post within your private data center that users need to be able to connect to. So you'll select that private app. Email outbound is just exactly like Tina's mentioned to you. Email outbound is where we do the integration into a Mimecast and a Proofpoint. So we look for SMT outbound traffic where we apply DLP policies, and we can add an X forward header to that email by saying we can see it contains, say, GDPR data, and we don't want you to send the email. So it will be stopped then via Mimecast, where you have full control then, and you can then either release the email or just keep it for being blocked. All right. So you can see there exactly what Tina's then mentioned as well. So this is the differences that you can see between ourselves and other, say, SWIG vendors or, you know, other CASB vendors. We can control the activity. Okay. So whether you do an upload, okay, or you do a post, or you do a send or a form post, and maybe a, you know, maybe a create or whatever the case is. Okay. You can then go and say, if it's this user and that specific group going to a cloud storage and is trying to upload, post, share, and so forth, and this contains PCI data or GDPR data, okay, or maybe let's say a POPIA data, which is the South African Act, okay, what we'll do is then what we will say is we want to block the users from uploading, posting, sending, and form post those different documents. Okay, so when it triggers those DLP profiles, we'll prevent the user from doing so. You'll give it a policy name, and then what you will do is you'll save that policy, and it works exactly the same as a firewall. So it reads it from top to bottom. Okay, so as to, you know, should you be uploading data? So for argument's sake, your executive group or HR group needs to be able to upload data into a, say, a personal instance of OneDrive. We will allow them, but the next policy will be then a global policy, which is for the rest of the organization, where we prevent the users from uploading those data. You can see there I've created a couple of policies over here, and I'm not going to go through all of them. It's going to take us a couple of hours to do so. I'm going to demonstrate to you. First of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate in terms of, you know, just the OneDrive instance, how, you know, how we differentiate between the two, and then the same with the Google instance. But something that I just quickly want to show you as well before I move into a demo is we cannot ever then go with the APIs that I've created there. So you saw I had an instance of SharePoint, I had one with OneDrive, and I had one with your Outlook as well as Microsoft Teams. So let's use one for Microsoft Teams for argument's sake. I'll create a policy. You will see immediately it will then go and say, well, we're going to use Microsoft Teams, but you have the ability to move between the ones that you have the API built to. This is my instance name. Okay, I can then say I want to do it for a specific set, a specific user or user groups or whatever the case might be. In this case, I'm just going to say all users. Then you have the option then to look for a specific channel, all right? Or you can say, well, for a direct message. Okay, so in this case, we'll just go with a direct message, doesn't matter. And then what we can do is we can look at specific sharing options. You know, is it externally shared, internally shared, and so forth? But in this case, we want to know wherever it's shared, okay? And does it include an attachment or a text? So then we will then create a policy based on that by saying, well, if it contains any data, and I'm going to get to that, you will see we can then go say like a Word document for argument's sake, or what you can do is say all file types. And then again, you'll use that DLP profile. So you can then select say PCI or GDPR. Then what you can do is you can go with the next, and you will see the action is then you either alert. So alert means the user won't be notified, but you will have visibility within the tenant that all users are making use of Microsoft Teams with direct messaging where they're sharing GDPR data. Okay, so you will see who are actually sharing those data. Or you can create a block where the user won't be able to share GDPR data then in a Microsoft direct channel, Teams channel, or messaging where he maybe just adds a, you know, individual's identity and so forth. Okay, you can then set a notification. You can notify the user. You can notify the owner of the file itself. You can notify the tenant admin, or you can send it to your SOC. Okay, so they can have a look at it and they can say, well, why is this happening? All right, give it a policy name. Once you've created that policy, what you will see is over here, and let's just quickly see if it saves it. I need to give it a policy name, but anyhow, it will then lie over here. All right. Then what it will do is you will see under your API enabled protection, if I go into Microsoft Teams for argument's sake, this is something that you will see. And just for you guys, you're going to ask me now, but you don't have any policies. It's because I'm using this specific Microsoft account in two different tenants. So we have the Microsoft account set up in another tenant where I have visibility and we've created the policies. So you can see that this is the visibility that you have. Is there any DLP data being shared and so forth? you then go into your OneDrive instance over here, you will then again see how much file or how many files are actually within your OneDrive instance. It takes a while to load. You know, is there any malware files within your OneDrive instance? Is there any files with DLP violation? Okay, and then also you can see what's the file types. Now, what you cannot ever do is you can drill down into this. You can see these are files that's publicly shared. Okay, so if I go into this file, all right, so like Tinus mentioned, so API is after the fact. Okay, so it's data at rest where we can have a look at this data. Now you can see these files are publicly shared. Okay, now this might contain, say, PCI data or GDPR data. Now what you can do is you can select that specific file, okay, and then what you can do is you can set the action and you can say, well, remove that public link, so that immediately that file is not exposed to the internet anymore. Okay, so that's with API, but you have then full visibility of, you know, how many files do you have, is there, you know, DLP violations and so forth.